we've met up with Cy Watts of Wild Presentations again today. We just met up with him in the car park at Brandon Marsh Reserve, and he's just driving us to the Brinklow Canal, where we hope that we're going to see some nuthatches. So see you there. Well, here we are at the Brinklow Canal side. The canal system in the UK used to be a major way of moving goods around the country, but obviously now the canals are just used for pleasure craft. But what a beautiful spring day it is today. And these are the feeders where nuthatches are regular visitors. So let's wait for one to come along. We've just got a robin at the moment. There's plenty of spring bird song in the air, which is really nice to hear. And we've got a male chaffinch just come into the tree above us there. Also some dunnock. Really is a beautiful light today. Selection of tits, a great tit there. Still waiting for our first nuthatch to visit the table, and indeed there we are. Probably around about 3 or 4 years since I last got some decent nuthatch footage in a wood quite close to us at home, but the light is much better today. Nuthatches prefer mature woodland, and despite their name they also eat insects and seeds and beech mast and so on. It's really great to see them so close. I'm just standing by the car only a few feet away, and they're just happily coming down to the table. Excellent stuff. We're just going to move a little bit further up the country road that runs adjacent to the canal, and trying to track some more birds down. We just put some seed out. I'm just sitting in the car and just basically see what comes along. It's an excellent way to watch birds. Just put some seed out and watch them come down. Surprising how quickly they do come in. We've got a selection of tits here, great tit and blue tit, and these lovely little cold tit. Tiny little birds, not much bigger than a goldcrest really. Just sitting in the car watching them come down. Cars can actually make great hides. Birds don't seem to associate them with humans. They just come in, grab some seed, and then fly back up into the surrounding trees. Oh, we've got our first nuthatch at this spot, just in the tree above us there. Nuthatches actually have a green status with the RSPB. They're not declining or endangered in any way. As I mentioned earlier, they prefer mature woodland, and they don't really move very far from the wood where they hatched. Okay, we had great views of nuthatches by the canal there, and we've made the short drive to Brandon Marsh. I'm going to take a walk through the woods and see if we can see some tree creepers. I saw one by the canal, but didn't have time to get the camera on it. You can see it's really established woodland here. Familiar sound of robins all around us, but now a less familiar call to me. Hear that call there? It's actually the call of yet another nuthatch. See it up in the tree there, using what looks like an old woodpecker hole as a nest hole. The old country name for a nuthatch is mud dabbler or mud stomper, because of its habit of plastering a bigger hole with mud to make it more nuthatch size. And I've just grabbed a still there. You can see it's got some nest material by the look of it in its beak. We'll take it inside to make the nest ready for the female to lay her eggs. I think these distant swans may have been hooper swans. I don't think you get mute swans in such big groups, but I don't know for sure. and yet more signs of spring as we wander through Brandon Marsh. Just going to make our way through this wood and over the meadow to the riverside, where I'm hoping to grab an interview with Simon Watts, who of course is our guide today. We're just down by the riverside now with Simon Watts of Wild Presentations, enjoying the spring sunshine. Had a really nice day with Simon today. Got some really good nuthatch footage, so I thought I'd do this quick interview with him. So in the recent blog we did, Simon, I explained how I got into wildlife, you know, when I was very young through my dad, and then my obsession with cameras and so on, and then eventually doing it as a living. So when did you first get into nature?
So it started when I was probably about 3 years old. We lived in Staffordshire. This is 76, 77, and that was with peer pressure. I had an older brother, 4 years older than me. He was into wildlife, butterflies, and he would come back with walks away with his mates and talk about seeing sparrowhawks. And of course, in the 70s, with the problems with DDTs, there was very few sparrowhawks, so it was a very glamorous thing to say. He was bought then on his birthday a book by Lambert's Birds of Garden and Woodland, I believe. And my dad, I remember once, picked me up, if there was an epiphanal moment, it was this one. He picked me up to look through a telescope and see a collared dove on top of an aerial on our council estate. And of course, at the time, collared doves were relatively new as well. And then he showed me the picture in this book, this Lambert's book, of the collared dove. And I related instantly then from picture to living thing. And as I turned the pages of this book, I realised that I could possibly see this bird and this bird, and they looked more amazing with each page that I turned. And from that moment I probably was hooked. My dad then got a job via the UN out into Central Africa, in Malawi, and we lived in a city called Blantyre, and I really then just raced away with a kind of Gerald Durrell childhood, hatching lizards in my room, and just really having the freedom and being in a position to embrace nature wholeheartedly. And from that moment it never left me, really.
Excellent. And what about camera work? How long have you had an interest in that?
Well, actually, whilst we were in Africa, there wasn't very many photo processing shops, so my dad, as a keen photographer, created his own darkroom. And I was often found in the darkroom with Dad, with his trays of chemicals and his washing lines and pegs. And I suppose then that was the embers for capturing stuff. Went to South Africa post-grad after I got my degree in nursing, and bought myself a camcorder then, so that would have been 2002. Just on the turn of camcorders when they were relatively decent, image quality was coming up to spec, with a relatively good zoom. And from that moment on, after editing that holiday video as it were, I decided then that every holiday I went on I would record. And it was the old kind of VCR to VCR jobs of editing, and much the same as you said, distribute it amongst friends. I'm sure they're really quite dull unless you're into wildlife, but it made me, it gave me an element of creativity to the hobby, which I loved, which I'd never had before, which was a plus, definitely.
And when did you decide to try and, you know, sort of combine your hobby with a profession? That
was really born from nursing. I did 15 years in the community, and I realised very quickly that as well as the intervention I was giving, the nursing intervention I was giving to patients, my idle chit-chat of where I'd been and what I'd seen was actually having a huge effect, so much so that with the continuity of care that I was giving, I was coming back to the same people. They were more interested in where I'd been and what I'd seen than the treatment or the care plan that I was trying to initiate. So the embers for wild presentations began then, especially in residential and sheltered environments. I realised that these guys, you know, would have walked out in the countryside often, even if they weren't necessarily wildlife addicts. They certainly would have embraced the countryside and the outdoors at holiday times. You know, this is always a pleasurable thing for them, and yet in these residential and sheltered environments, at no fault of their activities coordinators or the staff there simply wasn't the supply of this, but there was no element for them to feel as if they were embracing nature once more. So crazy idea of bringing in films that I would edit, show them on a huge way, 2 metre widescreen in HD, and hopefully then give them just an hour of freedom where they could feel, with live narration and full interaction, they could feel that they were, you know, out there once again, and have it sort of chronologically. So I will return through the seasons, and we can embrace all these different changes that they would have embraced naturally if they'd been able to, even if they were more mobile.
Excellent. I think it's a wonderful thing you do, Simon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the interview.
Pleasure.